What if? The moment that should have ended your life was the moment fate finally caught you. The raging river crushed against Margaret Thompson's body as if trying to pull her under again and again. Cold water slapped her face, her fingers clinging desperately to a cracked branch that was the only thing keeping her alive. Her knuckles were white, her lungs burned. Her skirts dragged her down like heavy chains. The peaceful Colorado River had turned into a monster after the sudden spring flood of 1875, swallowing her wagon, her horse, and everything she owned. The branch snapped. Margaret plunged into the wild current. Water rushed over her head. She kicked hard, fighting to reach the surface again, fighting for one more breath. She opened her mouth to scream, but only river water filled her throat. Just when she thought it was over, she felt an arm wrap around her waist, strong, steady, pulling her upward. "I've got you!" a rough voice shouted over the roaring water. Margaret broke the surface, gasping for air as the stranger held her tightly against his chest. She felt the powerful drag of his legs as he pushed them toward the muddy riverbank, refusing to let the water take her again. When they reached solid ground, he half lifted, half carried her onto the shore. Margaret collapsed onto her hands and knees, coughing hard until the river spilled out of her lungs. Her whole body shook. A steady hand rubbed her back. "Breathe," the man said gently. "You're safe now. Just breathe." Margaret looked up through blurred eyes. The man kneeling beside her was soaked from head to toe. Water dripped from his dark hair, flattened beneath a battered cowboy hat. His sun-darkened skin made the sharp blue of his eyes stand out even more. A rough shadow darkened his jaw. His denim shirt and leather vest clung to him, drenched. "Thank you," she whispered. I thought I was going to die." He helped her sit up, his hands warm despite the cold water. "Name's Jackson Miller," he said. "Most folks call me Jack." "Margaret Thompson," she choked out. "I was heading to Silver Creek. The river, it took everything." Quote, Jack scanned the destroyed river, jaw tightening. "Your wagon?" "Gone." "Your horse?" She nodded weakly. "Everything." Something flickered in his face, recognition, and then something deeper. Before she could understand it, he stood and pulled her gently to her feet. "Miss Thompson," he said, holding her hand tighter than she expected, his voice low and intense. "I know this sounds strange, but I swear I'm not letting go again." "Again?" Margaret blinked, confused. "We've never met before." A sad smile touched his lips, not in a way you'd remember. Before she could ask more, the sound of galloping hooves echoed across the bank. 3 riders appeared, one with a sheriff's badge. "Miller," the sheriff called. "Saw a wagon wash out upstream. Guess you found the passenger." Jack kept his hand firmly around Margaret's arm, as if afraid she'd slip away like the river had tried to take her. "This is Miss Thompson," Jack said. "She lost everything in the flood." The sheriff removed his hat respectfully. "Ma'am, sorry for your trouble. Where you headed?" Quote, "Silver Creek," she said, shivering hard as the wind cut through her wet clothes. "My uncle has a store there." "That's a long ride from here," the sheriff said. "Miller's ranch is the closest place. He can get you warm and dry before nightfall." Jack nodded. "I was thinking the same." Normally, Margaret would have refused. No unmarried woman traveled alone with a man she didn't know, but she had no supplies, no horse, and night was coming fast. Staying out here meant danger she wasn't ready to face. "That's very kind of you," she said. "Jack," he corrected softly. "Call me Jack." He lifted her onto his chestnut stallion, then mounted behind her. His arm circled her as he took the reins, his chest warm against her back. "Hold on," he murmured. As they rode away from the raging river, Margaret couldn't shake the strange feeling settling inside her. Jack had looked at her with something more than concern, something familiar, something almost like recognition. Deep in her heart, a small, uneasy question formed. How could a stranger look at her as if he'd lost her once before? The sun was dipping behind the mountains when they reached Jack's ranch, a sturdy log house nestled in a quiet valley, surrounded by tall grass and distant peaks. A stream, thankfully calm, wound through the land. "It's beautiful," Margaret breathed. "It's home," Jack said simply, helping her down from the horse. An older man, rushed over from the barn. "Mr. Miller! What in creation happened to you too?" Jack explained quickly, and soon Margaret was being ushered inside by Sarah, the warm-hearted housekeeper who clucked like a mother hen. "Child, you're soaked to the bone," Sarah said. "We need to get you warm before you catch your death. A hot bath, dry clothes, a warm kitchen." By the time she sat across the table from Jack, wearing borrowed clothes and wrapped in a blanket, she almost felt human again. But the way Jack watched her, the quiet intensity in his eyes, made her heart beat unevenly. "You saved my life," she said softly. Jack shook his head. "Maybe I was meant to." "Why did you say you weren't letting go again?" she asked. He hesitated, then met her eyes. "Because," he said, voice low and honest, "I've dreamed about you for years." Margaret froze. Dreamed about her? Before she could speak, he added quietly, "When I saw you in that water today, it felt like stepping into a dream I've had my whole life. Only this time, I wasn't too late." Margaret's heart pounded as fear and wonder tangled inside her. Who was this man? And why did she feel like she was meant to meet him from the moment he pulled her from the river? Was it possible for a stranger's words to feel like destiny? Margaret sat frozen in the warm kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she wasn't even drinking. Jack's words echoed in her mind. He had dreamed of her, not once, but for years. Dreams of a flood, dreams of losing her, dreams that always ended with her slipping away. And today he had found her in the river, exactly as he described. "Jack," she whispered, her voice barely steady, "dreams aren't real." His gaze didn't waver. "Some are." Before she could ask more, Sarah returned to gather dishes, sensing the tension but saying nothing. When she left, silence filled the small kitchen, heavy and uncomfortable. Margaret needed air. She stood, steadying herself on the table. "I should rest." Jack rose too, worry in his eyes. "Of course. You've had a hard day." Sarah showed Margaret to a small room, soft lamplight filling the space. The quilt-covered bed looked inviting, but Margaret's mind refused to settle. She lay awake long into the night, staring at the wooden ceiling and listening to the whisper of wind outside. Why her? Why his dreams? Why had he found her at the exact moment the river tried to take her life? Morning sunlight finally stirred her awake. She dressed in the borrowed dress and made her way to the kitchen. Sarah smiled warmly. "Good morning, dear. Mr. Miller's out checking the herd. He'll be back soon." Margaret nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. She didn't want to admit she'd hoped he'd be there. To distract herself, she helped Sarah with washing. The two women worked side by side, talking easily, until Sarah's voice dropped to a knowing tone. "He's a good man," she said. "Jack. Honest, quiet, keeps to himself." She shot Margaret a pointed look. "Never had a woman stay at this ranch before." Margaret's cheeks warmed. "I'm only here until I reach Silver Creek." Sarah raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Instead, she handed Margaret a wet shirt. "Still," she said with a smile, "I think he's taken quite a liking to you." Before Margaret could answer, hoofbeats approached. "Jack!" She stepped outside just as he swung off his horse, sunlight catching in his hair. He smiled, small, warm, and meant just for her. "Morning," he said softly. "I'm glad you're up." Margaret swallowed the sudden nervous flutter. "Good morning." He nodded toward town. "We should ride to Cedar Ridge. You need clothes, supplies, everything the river took." "I don't have money," she said quietly. "I didn't ask for money," Jack replied, gentle but firm. "I want to help." And she believed him. They rode to town together, Jack guiding the way. People greeted him warmly, clearly a respected man. Inside the general store, he encouraged her to pick what she needed. She chose only the basics, not wanting to be a burden. Jack bought everything without hesitation. At the dressmaker's, Mrs. Abernathy took Margaret's measurements and promised to have a proper traveling dress ready by tomorrow. "Anything for Jack Miller," she said cheerfully. "He's done more for this town than folks know." Margaret glanced at him. Jack looked uncomfortable with the praise. Over lunch at the hotel, his quiet nature thawed. They talked about their pasts, her childhood back east, his life as an orphan, how he built his ranch from nothing. At one point, he reached across the table, covering her hand gently. "I'm glad you're here," he said. She felt heat climb her throat. "I am too." They spent the afternoon running errands, but as the sun began to sink, something shifted. Jack grew tense, checking over his shoulder more than once. "What's wrong?" Margaret asked. "Nothing," he said, though she didn't believe him. Then she saw them, 3 hard-faced men riding toward them. The leader had a scar down his cheek. "Miller," the man said, nodding at Jack with cold familiarity. "Rollins," Jack returned, his voice flat. Rollins's eyes slid to Margaret, lingering too long. "And who's this?" Quote. Margaret felt Jack stiffen beside her. "Miss Thompson," he said sharply. "She's under my protection." Rollins smirked. "Is that so?" Margaret's stomach twisted. She didn't know Rollins, but she instantly disliked him. Rollins tipped his hat mockingly. "Safe travels." Then he rode off with his men. Margaret turned to Jack. "Who is he?" "Trouble," Jack said. "Stay away from him." "Always." They left town quickly after that, tension thick in the air. Jack rode beside her, protective and alert. But when the danger faded, something else replaced it. Quiet closeness. By the time they stopped beside a small stream to rest, the fear had melted into something warm and unexpected. As they sat beneath a cottonwood tree, Jack's voice dropped low. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Those dreams I had, they weren't just nightmares. They felt like memories of a life I hadn't lived yet." His gaze held hers. "And when I pulled you from that river, I knew it was you." Margaret's breath caught. He reached out slowly, as if afraid she'd pull away. "Margaret," he whispered, "I can't explain any of this, but I know I was meant to find you." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She didn't know what she believed, but she believed him. Before she knew what she was doing, she leaned closer. Jack lifted a hand, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek. Her breath hitched. The world seemed to still around them. He kissed her. Soft at first, almost hesitant, then deeper as she responded without thinking, her fingers curling into his shirt, as if holding on to someone she'd known longer than 2 days. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. Jack rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since I saw you in the water." Margaret's voice shook. "I'm glad you did." They mounted their horses again, both silent but changed. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, Jack's ranch came into view. And Margaret's heart whispered something she wasn't ready to say aloud. "This feels like home." But danger was still waiting on the horizon, and Rollins was the kind of man who didn't forget what he wanted. What if the place you feared leaving became the only place you longed to return to? The next morning came bright and clear over Jack's ranch. Margaret stepped outside, inhaling the cool air. She felt something in her chest she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, safety, belonging. Jack joined her a moment later, brushing hay from his hands. "Ready to ride to Silver Creek?" he asked softly. She nodded, though a heaviness settled in her heart. She didn't want to reach Silver Creek. She didn't want to say goodbye. But she needed to face her uncle, explain everything, and make her choice with a clear mind. They set out early, riding side by side through rolling hills and bright morning light. But halfway to town, Jack's posture stiffened. "What's wrong?" she asked. He scanned the horizon. "I don't like riding blind after running into Rollins yesterday." Margaret's stomach tightened. "Do you think he'll follow us?" "I don't know," Jack said. "But if he does, he won't get anywhere near you." His protectiveness warmed her and frightened her. The West was wild, and men like Rollins took whatever they wanted, no matter the cost. Still, they reached Silver Creek safely. The town bustled with life. Wagons, horses, townsfolk greeting one another. As they approached Thompson's Mercantile, Margaret's heart pounded. Her uncle was her last tie to her old life. Would he understand? The bell jingled as she entered the store. Behind the counter, her Uncle Henry looked up and froze. "Margaret?" he gasped. "My God, child, I feared the worst." He rushed forward, pulling her into a fierce embrace. When he finally noticed Jack, he straightened. "And who is this man with you?" "Uncle Henry, this is Jack Miller," Margaret said softly. "He saved my life." Henry listened carefully as she explained the flood, the river, and the rescue. By the time she finished, Henry's eyes had softened. "Mr. Miller," he said, shaking Jack's hand firmly, "I owe you more than I can ever repay." Jack dipped his head modestly. Anyone would have done the same. Henry smiled. Not everyone would have pulled her from a flooded river. There was a long, quiet moment. Then Margaret gathered her courage. "Uncle, I want to stay with Jack at his ranch for a while," she said gently. "I need time to understand what's happening between us." Henry studied her face, then Jack's. Whatever he saw made him nod slowly. "You're a grown woman now," he said. "Follow your heart." Relief washed over her. They stayed the night in Henry's home above the store. Jack slept in Henry's study, but before Margaret went to bed, she stepped into the doorway to whisper goodnight. Jack smiled softly. "I meant every word I said by the river. I'm not letting go." She swallowed. Good. The next morning, after breakfast and heartfelt goodbyes, they rode back towards Cedar Ridge. Margaret felt lighter now, her uncle's blessing lifting the last weight from her chest. Stopping at a quiet stream for lunch, they sat together on the blanket Jack spread out. The air was warm and gentle. Cottonwood leaves rustled softly overhead. Margaret took a deep breath. "Jack, there's something I want to ask." He turned to her. "Anything." "Those dreams," she said carefully, "if you'd never found me, would you have spent your whole life looking?" Jack didn't hesitate. "Yes." Her heart tugged painfully. He meant it. Every syllable. She reached out and touched his cheek. "Then I'm glad you did find me," she whispered. Jack leaned in, kissing her softly, then deeper as she moved closer. His hand came up to her waist, holding her with gentle certainty. When the kiss broke, Margaret's heart was pounding. "Jack, I don't want to go to Silver Creek. Not yet. I want to go back to your ranch." A smile spread across his face, slow and warm. "Then that's exactly where we'll go." They packed up and rode toward the ranch, only to stop short when 3 riders stepped out onto the trail. Rollins. Jack immediately moved his horse in front of Margaret's. "What do you want?" Jack asked sharply. Rollins smiled, a cold twist of his lips. "Heard you've been keeping company with a new lady. Thought I might say hello." Quote. Margaret's hands trembled. Rollins's eyes were fixed on her like a hunter targeting prey. "She's with me," Jack said, voice like steel. Rollins shrugged. "Never stopped me before." Jack's jaw clenched. "You take one step toward her, and it'll be the last step you make." A tense silence hung in the air. Rollins studied Jack's face, weighing whether this was a fight he wanted. Finally, he smirked and tugged his reins. "Not worth the trouble today, Miller, but be careful who you claim in these parts." He and his men rode off. Margaret let out a shaking breath. "Jack," he looked at me like... "I know," Jack said, pulling her close, "and I won't let anyone hurt you." They reached the ranch near sunset. Sarah and Thomas welcomed them with smiles and concern. That night, after dinner, Jack walked Margaret to the footbridge over the quiet stream. The stars shimmered above them. The night was soft and still. "Margaret," Jack said, taking both her hands, "I know this is sudden. I know everything's happened fast. But I need to say this." Her breath hitched. "Jack, I love you," he said, simply, earnestly. "I think I've loved you longer than I've known you. When I pulled you from that river, something inside me settled, like I'd finally found what I'd been searching for." Tears filled her eyes. "And I want you," he continued, "not just for a little while. I want you as my partner, my wife, my future." Margaret's heart swelled. "I love you too," she whispered. "Against all reason, I do, and I want whatever future you want." Jack's voice broke. "Does that mean?" Quote, "Yes," she said softly. "I'll marry you. When we're ready." Jack kissed her under the moonlight, a kiss full of promise and hope and everything they hadn't yet said. That night, for the first time in years, Jack didn't dream of a woman drowning. Because she was safe, with him. And he wasn't letting go.